Hello, beautiful friends. Welcome back. It's your girl, Coach Cece here. We are going to dive into this discussion right away because we got loads to talk about. Yes.Fit, we are all about those races. We love those medals. We love those achievements. But with running, we have a lot of injuries. We tend to have a lot of wear and tear on the body. It's high impact. So today I just want to kind of go over those very common running injuries and what we can do if we address them, if we assess them, and we can better ourselves by learning how to heal quickly so that we can keep racking up those miles and keep building and keep getting stronger each and every day. I always like to start with the positives. If you know me at all, I love those good benefits, those perks of your workout, right? So let's just quickly address some of those health benefits that we get from running. A little obvious, some not so much. So starting with the health benefits for your body, we build those strong bones. We build a weight-bearing exercise that, again, as I mentioned, is high impact. So your body's going to have to be working harder. That being said, you're going to strengthen muscle, you're going to strengthen bones. You're also, overall, more obvious one is improving your cardiovascular fitness. So your aerobic threshold is going to expand. Your stamina is going to increase. You're going to go from running 1 mile to 2 to 3, and so on until before you know it, you can do that 5K. No problem. 10K, piece of cake. And you just feel like a marathoner in no time, right? So it does take practice and consistency, but overall, you're going to feel that ability to pace yourself and breathe and be a little bit better and a little bit stronger. Definitely going to be burning lots more calories here. So again, with that high impact comes a heavier heart rate. Heavy heart rate means body's working harder. Body working harder means you're sweating, you're getting more bang for your buck on that workout. And it also helps maintain a healthy weight. So it's obviously reducing fat and the overall body composition, and you'll be able to kind of slim and trim. So if your goal is always that long, lean muscle approach where all your muscles are very defined and very sharp, running is one of those easy ways to help achieve that goal. Also, you know me and mental health, right? I love it. Big fan. So to shed some light on some psychological benefits that come from running, we talk about that runner's high. We talk about that endorphin release. But overall, it'll help de-stress the mental. You get that, again, sense of release. So it's great. And that also comes from that increase of oxygen intake. There's the science that backs it, of course. We can talk all about that just on a separate podcast, just the science behind running and how beneficial it is. But it also reduces the risk of heart attacks, of strokes. It lowers the risk of developing cancer and cardiovascular disease from just 5 to 10 minutes a day of intense, medium to intense cardio. You'll be able to actually reduce those risks for your overall health, your well-being. So it's not just about being quote unquote fit. It's also about being healthy, living longer, having a sustainable lifestyle. So it doesn't take a long time. Again, 5 to 10 minutes. Anyone can set aside 5 to 10 minutes of their day. A light jog to warm up, that takes 2 to 3 minutes. By 15 minutes or less, you have an amazing workout that just helps you. And that's all just running, right? So moving on, a lot of people have complained or have had moments where they're injured or they're sore or they can't keep doing the pace that they were building or that they were tracking. So now they feel this is where that cycle of consistency starts to break off, and this is where a lot of us start to dwindle back down and go, oh, maybe I can't do this, and we crawl back into that little negative headspace. So before we get there, know that you're not alone, right? So about 80% of runners say that they have some sort of injury every year. So the odds are not in your favor. That doesn't mean that you can't run. That doesn't mean that everyone who runs is going to be injured. That just means, again, you have to understand what your body's telling you and understand how to address it when it does and how to fix it. So let's talk about those top injuries for runners and how to cope with them, how to deal with them, and how to understand how to heal effectively and safely. What can you run through? What can you just push the pain away? Or is it better to just take a few days light, a few days off, maybe switch up your cardio? Maybe if you're a runner today, you're going to be cycling or something like that. So there's definitely options and room for wiggle room to still attack your goals, whether you have these injuries. Depending on the severity, of course, always rest and recover, always listen to your body. Let's dive in. So the first one I want to talk about is plantar fasciitis. That's a fun one to say. The inflammation, essentially, of the bottom of the foot. So this one happens all the time in the running world, depending on the type of shoe you have, or the way you bear your weight. That's going to be very annoying. It's going to constantly be this throbbing sensation in your heel. If you feel what I'm telling you, if you're like, man, that's me, I totally know what that's like, there's definitely options. So, especially if the more consistent you are, the worse it gets, this is definitely probably you. So this can happen from overtraining, overuse, not wearing proper footwear, which we talked about, right? Wearing down on that heel part of your shoe. This is overall going to be just weakening the muscle, weakening all the tendons, and your feet's going to feel just very heavy on that high impact. Right when your foot lands onto the ground, that's when you're going to really feel that big push. So what can you do? What's the fix if you feel this inflammation, this discomfort? What are the options here? You can start by simply putting maybe a shoe insert, or maybe it's time to replace. Maybe those runner shoes that you love oh so much have just run one too many miles. That is okay. So making sure that our running shoe has a thicker support and a little bit more of a glide to it so that it can really bend. As you put weight, you want your foot to feel like it can move with the shoe, not adding an extra piece of tension or resistance to your foot, if that makes sense. Being able to avoid bare feet, right? So helping to keep yourself in a constraint. So if you're at home relaxing and stuff, wear some shoes, wear some fun, comfy, supportive shoes around those heels so that you're not letting it kind of expand and get a little more irritated. Again, if you think about your shin connecting to your ankle, right? Putting all of that weight straight down into your heels, you're going to be shifting all that weight towards the back of your foot, and it's just going to keep pounding with pain. So thinking about alleviating, sitting a little more upright, distributing your balance more towards the ball of your foot. That's a little bit trickier, right? Because we develop these habits and where we distribute weight from the time we're little, when we're walking, when we're first starting to run, when we first develop these habits. So finding a way to make sure you're pushing that weight towards the center. If you can make that conscious effort, it'll help alleviate so that you can bring that inflammation down. And of course, icing it, making sure it's relaxed, elevated if you can at times, and not being on it so much. So maybe pulling back a little bit. If you're running 5 miles normally every day, maybe we're walking 1, running 1, that's about it. Trying to keep it very minimal so that you can recover quickly. Next one, moving on. Achilles tendonitis. So we're traveling up the foot, right around that base of the ankle and towards the back. You know that Achilles heel terminology, right? So your Achilles tendonitis is essentially just talking about the tendon being inflamed itself. So lowering that leg, it's limiting that blood flow. You want to feel a little bit more stretch than you do if you're just flat foot planting all the way down. You're kind of jerking that entire tendon. You're shocking it with the impact of the floor. So being able to relax it, keep it moving, you'll allow some blood flow in that area. That'll also help alleviate any kind of aches or tiny little pains. Things to also remember: the calves are going to be the biggest tall tale sign of Achilles tendonitis, right? If the calves are really tight, if there's a strain maybe even on the outside of your calves, maybe it's time to do some exercises, some stretching and developing for your calf muscles. Maybe instead of just running, do some slow push-ups from the heel all the way to the ball of that foot to really strengthen the calf, have it feel that tight squeeze and relax down. Another good option to stretch them out is if you're a big yogi or you're into any kind of meditation or stretch flow, you want to think about doing downward dog, where you can arch those heels into the ground, pressing down into the surface so that you elongate those muscles towards the back. Being able to kind of strengthen them while lengthening them so that you can find somewhere to overall slowly start to develop a stronger sense of your muscles, and you don't have to rely so much on your tendon, therefore less inflammation, less problems. More fix with this one specifically, aside from resting, aside from icing it and stretching, because that will relieve, like I said, a lot of those symptoms. But you also want to think about strengthening over time, right? We talked about doing a little push, strengthening those calves. You can also do things such as single leg squats, maybe even if it's an assisted single leg squat up against the wall, or you're holding on to something, that will help strengthen up through the hamstring. Balance, distribution of weight, all those good qualities that we want to make sure that we're having while we're also running. That's another opportunity to feel very strong and being able to distribute the weight not to where it hurts, right? Because if all these tiny little pieces into our foot is where we're going to be developing all these small issues. But as we get to the bigger muscles, you'll see that it's going to be a little bit easier to stretch it and bounce back. These tiny ones, it's going to take a lot longer. So you have to be consistent. It doesn't mean stop stretching, stop training, stop growing the moment you stop feeling pain. That means you have to keep it up. That just means if you stop feeling pain, that means you know it's working. So making sure that you have those exercises and you can explore options that work best for you, but whether it's strengthening, lengthening, or overall just flexibility, making sure you compile something that works for you and you implement it into a daily routine, whether it's stretching before you run, whether it's strength training for those calf muscles specifically, and then slowly working your way around it. You have to find the best option for you. Next one, speaking of bigger muscles, we're actually going to go right next to those big quads, right? We've got those nice thighs, super strong. Alongside of them runs this tendon, the IT band. So it's essentially connecting your knee to your hip. So the IT band syndrome is essentially when that tendon becomes inflamed. Go figure. That one can be super painful. If you've ever experienced this, it happens a lot when we're going downhill or we're acquiring some tougher terrain. We might feel like there is a sharp stabbing pain that goes right by the knee or maybe even alongside the outside by the hip. No bueno, my friends. We are going to try to stretch it out, but because it's a tendon, it's a little bit tougher to get to. It's a lot of those quad stretches stretch just that. They're stretching that quad. So making sure that we do some hip cradles to loosen up hip flexors to help alleviate and balance that IT band is super important. But over time, if the IT band gets worse, if we're not addressing the situation, it will tighten. Sometimes it does appear inflamed. It swells. It starts to get a little bit more stiffness. Pain will become super intense. And ultimately, you won't be able to run. You'll feel like you literally cannot even go a little bit. Not even those 5 minutes that help reduce all those diseases and stroke and cancer, all that stuff. So super important to be able to stretch, recover, restore. Massaging here through the hamstring muscles and the quads. So from the back of the thigh all the way to the front of the thigh helps strengthen those muscles, get that blood flow back into there, and allows them to recover. That then helps the tendon itself. Foam rollers are a huge thing. Chris has a great finisher on our app. So if you go to Yes.Fit, you're a power member, you can sign and look up for the foam roller finisher. That's going to be super important. To stretch out that IT band. You'll see a lot of good stretches for runners also on a separate finisher. So a 5-10 minute video that really breaks down a nice circuit to get the blood flow moving in all the right parts there. Avoid going downhill. Avoid those tough terrains while you're still trying to lessen the impact here. Strengthening your hips, hip flexors, quads, hamstrings with all these exercises, even your glutes. So my ladies that like that booty, you know what's up. If you strengthen all those muscles, that IT band doesn't have to do all the work when you're running downhill or where you're lopsided or you're anything kind of counterbalancing, if you will, to try to hold your body up, because where this starts to pull is from the fact that your toes are trying to push back against your body that's moving forward. So it runs again all the way up that leg. So this is another one where it slowly starts, but once it starts, you have to address it right away or it will just keep bothering you. It will just keep getting worse. Moving forward. This arguably could have been number one. It is probably one of the most common things I hear about from clients when I say, hey, we're going to go for a run. This is what I get all the time. Oh, but my knee, right? If that is you, you can silently admit to yourself, raise your hand, you know it's you. We hear that all the time. My knees, right? They take a big hit with running. So let's talk about it. Everyone wants to know. Runner's knee is a super common symptom. It's basically a ache under the kneecap, kind of festering right underneath while you're running. Even after you're running, you're going to feel that throbbing sensation. It starts as just a little pain. You're like, oh, maybe I just tweaked something. That quote unquote tweak is going to fester until it's impossible to even feel like you're moving fast enough. You can't move past a walk without feeling that pain. Standing will start to hurt. I mean, this one really is the smallest pain that just blows up. So a common cause with this runner's knee, it depends on a lot, right? So it depends on your muscle groups around it, coming from those calves all the way up above it to those quads. How your hips move is a direct effect to those knees. If your hips are tight and you're keeping everything square and forward and on top of those knees, well, yeah, they're going to feel a lot more pressure. If you're a little more relaxed, you have a little bit momentum, your whole muscle group as a whole for your legs is more limber. You're going to have a little bit more elasticity through your stride. It's going to be a little bit easier to balance and keep your body in the center of gravity as you run. Another common thing is, again, talking about old injuries, talking about biomechanical flaws as far as movement, as far as range of motion, as far as, sometimes we've had, maybe it's a back surgery, or maybe we did this, or maybe we're recovering from this. And so we start to modify how we are running, or maybe we were overweight. Now we just lost a bunch of weight. That changes where your distribution of weight is. And so at the bottom line is essentially this all boils down to your distribution of weight. So if you're having some issues with the knee, it's not about how heavy you're planting that foot. It's about where you're setting that center of gravity for yourself. So make sure, kind of do that assessment, right? Take a few strides and see where your body's leaning. That's going to be your telltale sign. There are runners that like to hinge back. There are also runners that will go full speed ahead and the head is tucked down and they're just running, right? And so those legs start to kind of slack behind. if you're an experienced runner, that might not bother you. You might have the quads and the hamstrings and the calves that you need to succeed, right? You might have the right hip flexors, the right range of motion, and everything is cool. And that is awesome. However, for the 80% of us that experience injuries every year with running, maybe it's time to adjust and look at where we're at and have that real moment to ourselves. So, what do you do if your knee continues to hurt perpetually, even if we are not running? Don't run. This is one of those few that I'm going to say don't scale back, right? For a lot of the other ones, I've been like, hey, scale back just a little bit, let it recover. This is going to be the one where I'm saying do not scale back, just don't run at all. Take a moment, take maybe a few days, maybe it's going to be a few weeks. I promise you'll get your stamina back. I promise you'll still hit those goals. Promise there's other ways to do this. Do not run, right? You only get 2 knees for free. So keep those as long as you can. So take that opportunity to relax, stretch, strengthen other muscles. Even your core is surprisingly involved when you're running. We want to make sure that we're still lifted and we're still engaged so that we're allowing our air to flow in and out to continue pushing that aerobic threshold, to continue pushing that oxygen. So go ahead and make sure that you're really breathing, taking that full lung, pushing out. Maybe this is a good time to do breathing exercises as well as strength training to help your muscles so that your knees don't have to feel it, right? It all comes down to being a little bit more body aware. Anything else as far as getting a little bit stretching, a little bit more push, staying away from anything that's high impact at all. So especially for those legs. So if you've got runner's knee, you've got this pain, it hurts just to walk, don't try running, don't try doing anything. This is not the time to bust out CC's burpees boot camp and go to town. This is not that time. Save that one for another day. Try doing a more restorative thing. Try doing a little bit more elasticity. So yeah, just keep moving with that. The last one I want to get to is one that I personally suffer from more than I care to admit, and I think is excruciatingly painful. And these are shin splints. I hate them. And if you've ever experienced them with me, you also hate them. And that's okay. We're going to talk about them. So it's just a basic term for saying pain in anywhere in that front shin area. So we've got the calves in the back. The shin feels almost like skin and bone, right? It's very thin up there. And shin splints all up and down can feel like little tiny stress fractures, essentially what they boil down to. So they can be excruciatingly painful because like any fracture, even if it's a tiny hairline fracture, it will feel like the worst pain ever. It'll feel so terrible, and it'll just radiate the whole way up from your shin all the way up to your quad. Sometimes I feel like even when I'm trying to stretch it out and I'm trying to get that little tendon and I'm trying to massage it, I'll use the foam roller as a great tool to use for shin splints. Also, if you even have a smaller, more direct way of doing any kind of foam rolling, I personally like to use a lacrosse ball. It's really good and can get into that deep tissue, and just essentially putting it underneath my shin and letting the floor and the weight of my leg do the work. And it'll sit there and it works. You have to really dig into those muscles and really let that blood flow get in there. But it does work to help alleviate some of that discomfort, because it can feel like walking is a chore, let alone running is out of the question. So definitely take heed when you start to feel that coming on. Some of the reasons why those things happen is, I'm a big sprinter. So I will go for, I like to run 1 mile to 2, and then all of a sudden that last like mile I'm doing for the day, I'm going to be doing interval training where I'm sprinting for 60 seconds, walking for 30, sprinting and so my interval training is super intense as far as going from a steady state to like revving the engine full throttle. And I love it that way. I feel great at the end of my workout. I feel like I did something awesome. I'm great, good to go. The issue with that is sometimes your body can't keep up. So that's something to keep in mind if you're increasing a volume or intensity of your workout dramatically or in a big jump all of a sudden. You're not being very gradual. Maybe you need to take a step back and go, hey, listen, so my body told me that I'm not here yet, and that's okay. I'm just going to scale it back a little bit. Maybe instead of doing a full mile of sprints, maybe I'm doing half a mile of sprints, and that's what we're going to do. So playing around with that intensity and volume. Also, trying to get better shoes is another one for this one specifically. I was one of those people that I found running shoes that I loved, and I was like, okay, love these, gonna wear them forever. Forever lasted me maybe 2 years, and now it's time for me to replace. I replaced my shoes recently, and I can tell you it made the world of difference for me. So looking for something with a little bit more cushion, a little bit more support, especially towards that front end, is going to be helpful. Again, still keeping it very light because you don't want to feel like you've got cement blocks on your feet for sure. That's going to create other problems that we've previously talked about. But making sure that you have that support for that impact while running, especially if you're going for intensity, if you're going explosive power, you want a shoe that can support that and can kind of break that impact to the ground as you run in that really explosive kind of stride. But again, the biggest fix for this is going to be massaging through that tenderness, that soreness, kind of breaking down that fire that you feel in those shins, taking any kind of rest and recovery that you might need. I will also taking that normal rest with ice, elevation, compression if you need it. Nothing super crazy, just to help that inflammation go down and get that blood flow starting to move and starting to get a little bit stronger. I won't say that you have to stop running altogether. I will say that will help your recovery process quickly. But what I can say is that I personally, when I have experienced my shin splints, I tend to reduce my training volume, but I still get out there and I still am pushing a lighter jog, if you will, instead of a full sprint. And then I immediately go into a really deep stretch, targeting specifically those shins, that front area, and massaging through it. And it does help and it does subside that pain. So not the worst, just very annoying, but it's not the worst. Definitely making sure that you take that opportunity to heal. So overall, right, this quick little recap here. Running has lots of health benefits, both physical and mental. So lots of things to grow from. There's opportunity to always get out there and be active. Running is super beneficial. You don't have to run from running, right? You don't have to be afraid of any of these injuries as long as you can address them and see them and listen to your body and really push yourself to heal before you make them worse to the point where then it becomes a serious issue, because a lot of these can turn into something very serious if not addressed right away. So that's my one big takeaway. These are just a few. There's a lot of other injuries. So always listen to your body. If you have any questions, as always, you can ask us, ask me, let me know. Hey, I'm running, I feel this type of way. Let me know, reach out. You know where to find us at Yes.Fit. So be sure to take that opportunity to open that communication, and we can talk about what we can do to help you so that you can keep getting out there, running, making those miles happen for you and making those medals and marathons keep going, yeah? So listen to that body, listen to it, assess the damage, and address it. That is all I have for you guys today. Thank you guys so much, and I will see you next time.